I mentioned earlier that many are kind of affected with
Yeah,
layoffs right now.
yeah,
What would be your advice for those who are affected by layoffs, or someone like me who got reorged into into a different role
yeah,
that they want to be in?
yeah. No, that's a really good thing to talk about. So I've worked in manufacturing. Come from a farm, so I've worked in agriculture. I'm now in the software industry in a pre-sales role. Okay. Of those, this is the best thing to do. So it's a great industry to be in. Yeah. It's also a challenging industry because everything is cyclical. It has highs and lows.
Yeah.
If you're around enough, you can remember people talk about the dot-com bust in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Then you hear about the financial crisis in 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
Now we might be looking back and talking about when Russia invaded Ukraine and Hamas did all the things they've done in Israel and how that impacts the world economy. So no industry can be on an upward trend forever.
Yeah.
So I have talked to people who've gone, hey, look, I'm impacted. I'm going to look to do something completely different. And again, when you do that, you want to explore your motivation, work out whether that is the right thing or whether that's the wrong reaction. Because if you do get impacted by these kind of things, it probably feels like a really big rejection.
Yep.
Hey, look, all these people, they picked, to get rid of my department kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, those kind of things are tough, but that's where you have to have some psychological resilience. You will go through shock, anger, grief, acceptance,
Yeah.
etc. So I sort of coach some people on that kind of thing. Hey, look, this is going to feel really difficult. You're going to have maybe a series of conversations if it's the UK. I know in the States, it's like, hey, come over here. Yeah, grab your stuff. Bye. In Europe, it can be quite a slow process, maybe happening over, several weeks.
Right.
So again, understand what it is. If it's just you that's going, then maybe you have to have a look at it because it's probably performance related, in which case you need to understand what it is and hope somebody gives you a straight answer.
Right.
If it's not, if they're laying off a whole department, then it shouldn't really be personal.
Right.
It should be like, okay, let's understand this. We work in a small industry, so let's leave on good terms. Typically, it does take a period of time to find your next gig. Yeah. So it can take up to 5 or 6 months to find it. So
Yep.
you need to, hopefully, if you've got a generous employer, they're going to give you something that says, hey, look, we can tide you over to pay your bills, etc., till you find something. Great pre-sales people are rare. They're really, really valuable. And even though our industry may have a little bit of a downturn, and a lot of companies also, things become a little bit fashionable. Hey, laying off 5%, 10% is fashionable. So everyone is doing it, even really successful companies. And then just settle down. Don't panic. Understand what skill set you've got. Work out what you really like doing. So one thing I did at one point was I was working for a really big organization, sell databases and other things, and sort of left them. And it's like, hey, what I really like doing is build up and scale up parts of an organizational. Yeah. So where you are recruiting people, you might be first boots on the ground, you might be in with a very small number of people, and you're looking to grow it to a multi-layer sales engineering organization.
Right.
So work out what you like and then just be smart, use your network, look on LinkedIn, find out what's out there. You might have to go through and do a series of interviews, but hey, you're a sales engineer, so you're good at selling things. The hardest thing to sell in the world is yourself. Yeah, but that is what you are going to do. And you're just going to have to go through a process and take your time. And if you are genuinely good, you will find something. Industry will take time and get into an upward cycle, in which case things will get much easier.
Right.
So, yeah, I would tell people to, if it's your first time, it can be really shocking. Yeah. If you're going to work in the high-tech industry for quite a few years, it's probably going to hit you at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you're just going to have to learn to roll with it and how to pick yourself up and move on and just like, hey, grow from it.
Yeah. Do you mind if I add a couple of things?
No, please do, Ramsey.
One of the one thing that we don't generally talk about, like you mentioned, the company will give you some tiding to tide you over.
Yeah.
Having savings on your own,
Yeah.
like most, like at least in the US and Canada, they might give you like 2 weeks pay for every year you've worked somewhere. So I've been somewhere for 5 years, I'm gonna get 10 weeks.
Yeah. 10 weeks. Yeah.
10 weeks is great, but it might not be enough, especially in this market.
Yeah.
Having savings, that definitely helps. You mentioned also figure out what you like.
Yeah.
I would also say figure out what you're good at. I had someone that I worked with who was a BDR and then became an SE for a year, and he got laid off.
Yeah.
And he really wanted to go back into sales engineering, but he was okay as a sales engineer. He's only been there for a year, but he was a great BDR.
Yeah.
And we kind of decided, you know what? Maybe right now, apply for BDR jobs.
Yeah.
Right? And it's always easier to get a job when you have a job.
I know you're absolutely right. I think that is really smart advice you've given there. It's like, hey, if you're really strong on the BDR and your narrative, around your career path for a BDR is really strong, like you say, this time will pass. This is a bit of a low point for the industry, and it will sort of pick up significantly because it's an industry that's very people based. You need a lot of people to sell software, despite what everyone's talking about AI. You need pre-sales people to sell AI.
Yeah, exactly. And also, like, let's say sales engineers specifically. I talked to a lot of people who like got laid off as a sales engineer, and they want to become an SE in a different industry. Right? But there are already people laid off in that industry that people can just hire.
Yeah.
So what's your competitive edge there? You don't have it. Whereas if you're in networking, go find a job in networking. You have a competitive edge because you already know the competition. So if you're working for Cisco and then you apply to Juniper, you know Cisco, for example. So these are the things that I thought about as you're